Hey everyone, this is Coloring Chemist. My name is Connie, and welcome back to my channel. This is the second time I've started this video now because I'm not sure what kind of video it is, and I have a controversial statement to make, and I'm not sure how to make it. Anyway, let's just go ahead and start, shall we? This is a page I'm working on in Spirit Animals and Hannah Carlson. I recently had a poll on my is it called a community tab? Is that what they call it? Anyway, I post, right? It was a posted text poll. And I had given viewers 4 choices of sort of the kinds of videos that you might like to see over the next few months. I'll try. Whether I do them or not, we'll just have to see. It was just kind of more of a curiosity thing. And the 4 options that I gave were, excuse me, coloring book collection, coloring supplies collection, color and chat, and like color along tutorials. I think I sort of combined that into one choice. Now there's certainly other kinds of videos that I make too, that I probably I'll always do a completed pages video, or at least I'll try. My experimentation videos, hauls, although there's going to be less of them this year because I'm trying to make a very conscious effort to be very, very, not that I think I always was kind of selective in the things that I bought. I'm going to try and be even more selective. I know that sounds silly considering the amount of stuff I buy, but I really did try and think about what I bought and why I was buying it, what I was going to use it for. Sometimes I failed at that, but that's beside the point. So the poll that I put out of those 4 choices, the one that came out ahead was color alongs, tutorials. And I'm okay with that, sort of. And here's the controversial part. And we're going to get into what I'm doing here in a sec. Color along, and I think I made this mistake in past, and viewers were very kind enough to sort of kind of help me sort it out in my head. In my head, I had sort of conflated color alongs and tutorials and said, well, they're kind of the same. But I don't think they are. I mean, if you think they are, that's totally fine. And I will say, because I'm going to have a little controversial statement here in a few minutes, you can totally disagree with me on any statement that I make, and even say so in the comments below. Just do it civilly. That's all I ask. You can disagree. Everybody's allowed to have their own opinion, right? And the things that I say and do in my videos, that's what they are. They're my opinion. But yeah, I sort of thought, color alongs, tutorials were kind of the same thing, but I don't know. A few viewers sort of said, color alongs are kind of, they're sort of like a tutorial, but they lean maybe more towards almost like a color and chat-ish, like sort of combined with a tutorial. Whereas tutorials, I think, are much more focused on teaching. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, and I know lots of you probably are, because you've maybe saw some of my other videos, I am a teacher. That's what I do. That's my day job. I teach chemistry, not this. And so teaching feels very natural to me. But the way I teach, and this is the way I teach in my chemistry courses as well, I'm a very, very big believer in teaching how and teaching why, if that makes sense. So in chemistry, there's math in high school chemistry. Probably less. You remember that from your own high school chemistry, or maybe you blocked it out. I don't know. But when I'm teaching chemistry or teaching how to balance chemical equations, those sorts of things, I am a very big believer in teaching students, sort of giving students the tools and the techniques, showing them how to use those tools and techniques for solving problems, and then giving them a whole bunch of problems to practice on, as opposed to showing them very specific questions and saying, okay, this is exactly how you're gonna solve this very particular type of question. These are exactly the steps you're gonna follow. And then here's a slightly different question, and this is exactly how you're gonna solve this question. Because what that does is, to me, and this is maybe the controversial part, and you'll see where, maybe you can already see where I'm going with this. That's too much hand holding. When I'm first teaching, absolutely, I will say, this is how you're going to solve this general type of question. And I will talk about why. Why do we do step 1? Why do we do step 2? Why do we do, et cetera, et cetera. And giving them those tools and techniques to then say, okay, here is a list of questions for you to try on your own. Maybe the first 1 or 2 look, exactly like the ones we did in our class. And then they're going to start to change a little bit. But the tools and techniques that I've taught you, you should still be able to apply those to these questions that are a little bit different and do those questions. And then the questions maybe get a little bit more different. Future editing Connie here. I just wanted to sort of insert this to say, of course, as I give the students those questions to work on, I am available for help, obviously. So, as they start moving into those questions that are a little bit different, I definitely encourage them to try and reason it out themselves using the tools and techniques that I've taught them, but I will certainly help them. And that would go the same for, tutorials and color alongs in this video. So that's, just wanted to insert that in case anybody thought I just, taught them and turned them loose and said, that's it, you're on your own, goodbye. No. I'm there, which you guys can use the comments to get help from me if you have questions about any tools or techniques that I teach in coloring. That's my teaching philosophy. So it's not about hand-holding all the way through. It's about giving students the tools and the techniques and the confidence. So, you can see the way I'm describing it, I start with a fair amount of hand-holding and then I back off and back off and back off. That's actually a term in educational philosophy called scaffolding, in case anyone was interested in that. That's kind of how I approach color alongs and specifically tutorials. Now here's the controversial bit. In terms of learning how to color, I kind of approached it myself, kind of like I teach my students how to do chemistry. I would watch a few videos on and when I say tools, I don't mean like physical tools. I mean tools as in, I guess, techniques, right? Sort of mental tools, or in this case, sort of tools of the art, of the craft, right? I guess techniques is maybe a better word. But just, techniques. I would watch a few videos on techniques, and then I would take those techniques and take a page, not necessarily the same page that I watched the person color, and apply those techniques. Because in my mind, that's the best way to learn. The best way to learn is to not follow exactly what someone else is doing. And I know that's kind of controversial. And why is it controversial, particularly in the coloring community? Because that's kind of the bread and butter of the coloring community, isn't it? And please, please, please don't take this as me saying, color alongs are bad. They're not bad. They're wonderful, and they can be wonderful teaching tools. They can be wonderfully relaxing to just watch, and you're kind of coloring along. And I know I've done I think I've done 1, no, maybe 2 color alongs on my channel. But I can't see myself putting out lots and lots of sort of full-length color alongs, because for me, and this is just for me, I would prefer to teach you guys or to show you guys small little bits of what I'm doing in the hopes that you'll pick up a technique, and then you can take that technique and apply it to anything you want, not just the same page that I happen to be coloring. Does that make sense? And I know that might be kind of controversial. And again, there's lots of folks on ColorTube, YouTube, that do full-length color alongs, and I think they're wonderful. They're wonderful. Like I say, for learning and just for relaxing and sitting down, and if you want to color, the same page as that person and have it turn out the way they did it, that's great. But for me, I feel more comfortable I guess maybe leaning more towards the tutorial side to say, here is some techniques, now go, apply them. And here's the big, it's not a caveat, but here's the big thing to just be aware of. When you take a technique, when you're watching a video and you learn a technique, and then you go and sort of apply it on your own, you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time coloring with Pitt pens and Staedtler pens. That's how we learn. The best way to learn is to make mistakes. And that's really, really hard, isn't it? Because when you make a mistake, you feel bad. You feel icky. There's that icky feeling inside, isn't there? Because you feel like, oh, I screwed up. I failed. Duh, why do I even do this? And you know what? Having those feelings, let those feelings happen. Let them kind of wash through you. Maybe close the book, walk away. But then come back later and say to yourself, it's okay. It really is. And I still work on this myself. I do. You know, you say to yourself, it's okay. It's okay I screwed up. It's okay it didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. Acrylic paint covers everything. That's my go-to. So, you know, if you screwed up, acrylic paint covers it. And you can even color over top acrylic paint with colored pencils, you know. So, and if you're going to try a new technique, don't try it on your absolute favorite page in a book. That's just a recipe for heartache. I try lots of new techniques. I just grab a piece of, like, you know, a scrap piece of just plain printer paper. Now, it's not going to react the same as, say, a page in a book, but if I'm just wanting to try, like, a color combination, or I'll just grab a scrap piece of paper, try it out, you know? So, am I going to do a lot of, you know, full-length color alongs? Probably not. So I hope that's not too disappointing. And maybe when I put my poll out, I should have maybe clarified. Maybe I should have put two different choices, you know, color alongs as one and tutorials as not. I don't know. But I certainly will do, I'll try and show you techniques. I'll try and show you ideas. I'll try and show you experiments that I've done, so that you can then take those techniques and experiments and try them yourself and practice. Because that's how you're going to take something that's new to you and become comfortable with it and sort of make it your own. I know I've watched some other videos of other colorists, and you know, maybe through my watching my videos, or maybe from somebody else, they've got themselves some Staedtler pens and some Pitt pens, and they've tried coloring with them. And sometimes I see videos and people will say, well, you know, I tried, but I was really, you know, frustrated and disappointed with them. And so, you know, either I'm not using them anymore, or even worse, I got rid of them. And that makes me sad. They're not a medium, I think, that is going to work for you the first time, and that can be frustrating. It took me forever to figure out how to color like I do with these Staedtler pens and Pitt pens. If you're just going to use them for basing, that's, you know, they're like, I mean, they're not exactly like Tombows. They are different, but they kind of in that sense would work like Crayola Super Tips or Tombows. You know, if you're just going to put down a base layer of just a flat color, and then you're going to shade over top with pencils, that's pretty easy. But that's not how I use these, at least not very often. So yeah, the way I use them, it's different, and it is going to take time. And I think for me to have a video where I say, you know, here's a page and you're going to do it with me. And I've done this. I did this with a Emily Lita Hall-Oberg page in her Fairy Tales and Folklores book. I'll try and remember to link that series of videos below if you want to watch those. You know, here's a page. Here's exactly where we're going to put this color, and it goes from this point to this point. And then here's exactly where we're going to put this exact color, and it goes from this point to this point. Doing a bunch of those and having you follow along with me feels safe and easy for you, but I don't know that it's going to help you to learn how to use these. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, that was a really long introduction, you staring at this page and listening to me talk, for me to get into what I did want to show you in this video. There's a couple of things that I wanted to show you in this video. This is a page that's obviously partly completed. you may be looking at this if you have this book and think to yourself, I do not remember the birds and the person being black. They weren't. I don't like coloring people. It's just not something I enjoy. I don't know if it's partly, me being on the spectrum and just not enjoy. I don't like things with eyes, particularly if it's eyes that are open and looking at me from the page. That I really don't like. If they're looking off somewhere else, that's better. Animals are better than people, but if there's in this book in particular, so if you have a page like, say this, I'm not going to color that. I won't. Because it's a human, it's facing me. The snake doesn't bother me. The snake's fine. But it's a human face, it's facing me, and it's looking at me. I don't like that. And I thought, well, this whole book is people and animals. That's the whole point, right? Spirit animals. I think it's also been released, it's called Soulmates. So I thought, how can I make this page more comfortable for me to color? And I was watching, what was I watching? Cranford. Or maybe it was Return to Cranford. It's a mini-series. It was put out probably by the BBC. I'm not sure. It has Judi Dench in it. And it's just one of these lovely period dramas that's just, yes, there's some scary stuff that happens and controversy in, but it's, anyway. And in it, Judi Dench's character ends up receiving from her childhood sweetheart, who she never married. Anyway, it's a long story. This might be Return to Cranford. I can't remember which. There's 2 series. But it's a silhouette. And that was, I think, popular back maybe early 1800s. I mean, before photography, or photography was in its infancy and was very expensive. And it was very popular for people who maybe couldn't necessarily afford to sit for a full-on portrait, right? But a silhouette, you would just take some sort of light source and then, have the person sit usually in profile, so sideways, and then their shadow would fall on a piece of paper, on the wall behind them, and then you would trace the shadow. So you're tracing the light would, if this is the person's head, the light is going to be shining this way, and so the shadow falls on the paper behind, and then you would trace the anyway. So Judi Dench's character gets a silhouette of her childhood sweetheart, and that just gave me an idea. And I thought, well, what if I just color the face in here like a silhouette? So I did. So I took my handy dandy Zig Art and Graphic Twin Black water-based marker, and I colored the whole face and hair and everything. Actually, no, that's not true. I did the face and the neck, like all the skin parts with this. And then I wanted to make the hair like slightly different. So I just took this black Languo gel pen and did the hair. But this black was slightly different. It sounds weird, but it was a slightly different black, color black, than the Zig. So then it didn't quite look like a silhouette. So actually I ended up, after this dried, I colored over top of it with this. So if I tilt, and I know you can probably see the gem shining there. I don't know if you can, there. Can you see a little bit? Kind of there. Can you see? Look kind of right down in here. You can see? The hair almost has a bit of shine to it, but the skin doesn't. It's completely matte. Now it is kind of a cool effect, and maybe I would do it again, but the wee bit of shine on the hair is because those Languo gel pens have a little bit of shine to them, whereas that Zig Art and Graphic, it's just a water-based marker. It's just completely matte. So if I tilt it, and it's interesting, so if I lay it flat like this, as far as I can tell, and I think hopefully maybe on camera it looks the same, it just looks black, right? So it's like a silhouette. But if I get it close, and I'm going to zoom in here, hopefully this works. If I get it close enough, and you see, you can still see the line work of the illustration, which is okay. I mean, if I wanted to completely black it out, I suppose I could have used like an Artex or a Languo or Guangna or one of those brush acrylic markers, right? You know, something like this, or the free ink ones. Those are a little bit more opaque, or a Posca. I mean, I could have just, you know, that would have literally covered everything. But I don't know. This has kind of an interesting look to it because I can still see, like, there you can see the earring. This I did not color over. Like, I colored around all of this because I knew I wanted to color the jewelry. So even though I was going to have a black silhouette, I wanted to color. Now, I didn't color her earrings. And there was a reason for that. I originally was going to, but then I thought, well, if I don't, at least with the hair jewel, it's sort of anchored on the outside of her head, if that makes sense, right? Whereas the earring, because her ear like is in black, it would look like the earring was coming from nowhere, if that makes sense. So I did choose to not color her earring. I just, you know, colored it over. It actually looks like there's a little bit of white gel pen. I must have smeared it. I have to go back over that with the black zig. So that's the number one thing that I wanted to share with you. If you have a page and there's an element that, like faces, maybe you don't like color faces either, just color black. Pretend it's an outline. Now, this works best if the face is in silhouette. I don't know how it would work with a face that's not in silhouette. Might be an interesting thing to try. I mean, again, you gotta be brave. And I'm stealing that from Lisa Taggart, Inky Bliss, wonderful mixed media artist. Has a channel here on YouTube. But that's her thing. She's always like, and she does full, you know, they're not color alongs, they're mixed media art alongs. But she does full length ones. She does sped up footage and that sort of thing. But she's always talking about use what you have, be brave. You don't have to do exactly what she's doing. You don't have to do this page. Pick a different page. So I did this, and then I was going to color the birds, but I don't know. And again, maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe if I don't, but if I have had another copy of this book and wanted to color this page again, maybe I'd choose differently. But to me, it looked odd to have her as a silhouette, but not the birds, because they're supposed to be soulmate. I don't know. So then I just colored the birds black too. And I thought about going over the line art once I colored the birds black in, like, I don't know, like a gold gel pen or a white gel pen. But I thought, no, I'm just going to leave them. The birds really are flat black. There's nothing. It's just that zig water-based. And you could do that. It wouldn't have to be the zig. You could do this with any water-based marker. You can do the alcohol marker too. You just are going to sacrifice the page on the other side. I can still see the line work on the birds if I, you know, tilt the page. So, you know, I could trace over it with a black gel pen or something, or not a black gel pen, but a gold gel pen, white gel pen. I don't know. But I think I'm just going to leave them matte black. So that was one sort of tip that I wanted to, or technique. It's not really a technique, but a tip. The background on this, you can see, and I think the lights here. What if I do this for a second? There. That's maybe a little bit truer to what I'm seeing. This is distress ink because I thought, well, if it's a silhouette, that's kind of old-timey. So I took, what colors did I take? This one, I think these three. So what do we got here? Frayed Burlap, Vintage Photo, and Gathered Twigs. And the Frayed Burlap was the lightest, so I just took, I have these little finger brushes, but I mean, you could use those larger brushes like those kind of round makeup brushes, or use whatever you have. And I kind of did everything in the Frayed Burlap. Then I took the Vintage Photo and I started at the corners and I kind of worked in, I wanted to create like the lightest part, you know, here, and then getting slightly darker. So I did everything in the Frayed Burlap, like right out to the edge. Then the Vintage Photo kind of, well, no, probably get more there and kind of out. And the Gathered Twigs, which is the darkest, I just kind of did a little bit on the corners, maybe a little bit up the very edges of the pages. So I tried to make the paper look old, basically. And I know that there is a distress ink called Old Paper. I think that's what it's called. But to me, that's too yellow. I wanted this to be more, well, like vintage photo, kind of that sepia kind of color. So that's why I chose these. And again, I don't know. Honestly, using inks, again, there's tons of videos out there of crafters and card makers, but it took me just kind of practicing. And I still screw up. Like I'm looking here and I'm thinking, well, I got a little dark right there. You see it? Right, kind of there and there. Maybe there's a little bit kind of dark here. I think here got a little dark because there's some oil on the page from my hand or fingers. Because I actually did the black first and then I did this. Probably should have done this first. But when you're doing these, you get a little bit of ink from the pad. So this is, not so much a color along a tutorial, but just kind of little tips and techniques. So this is Frayed Burlap. You can either stick it right on your finger, or you can just hold it like that. I kind of do, I don't know, a combination of both. I kind of have it like that. And I do have these little pads too, but I rarely use them. I find those are much harder to, you'll get circle marks, if that makes any sense. So let's say that's my scrap paper. And let's say this is where I wanted to do the, the inking. So on my scrap paper, so I get a little bit, right? See what I'm doing there? A little bit on this brush, piece of scrap paper. Just to make sure there's not, can you see when I first put it down? If I would have put that down on my, and maybe I need a little bit more here. If I would have put that down, I would have gotten that splot on my paper. But just glue the scrap, and then you put it down to where you want to do, you're barely touching the paper. In fact, even start moving your hand in a circular motion before you ever reach the paper. Just barely touch it, and then start putting more pressure. Now, you can barely see that, but that's the thing with inks. You have to keep building it up. So I get more ink here. Again, touch it here so I don't get that sploot. Barely touch the paper. Now, put down a little more pressure. You can change directions of your, and I always do like a circular motion. So can you see? We're starting to build up color. But that's how I use inks. So there's a little technique tutorial for you. Again, other people might do it differently. That's totally okay. These, by the way, come in tubes like this. You can get them on Amazon. There's, I think, 8 in a tube. And I bought enough of these so that I have a dedicated, and then I use little circle stickers. They're 1 inch. You can get those off Amazon too. And then a piece of like Scotch tape, or I think in the UK you guys call it sellotape, just to make sure it stays on there. But I have dedicated ones for each of the colors of ink, so then I don't have to wash these because I'm lazy. So this is always for Frayed Burlap. So that's how I did the background. You can see that I used some metallic gold gel pen for sort of the lines on her jewelry. I colored the inside of this jewel, so if I tilt it, you can see the colors. There you go. With some pink and some blue Pitt pens. And then I used a clear glaze pen, which I know you can't get anymore, Jelly Roll glaze. But you could also use like gloss Mod Podge and paint it over top. or the Ranger, what's it called, Glossy Accents, because that's how I got that. I wanted to make it look like shiny. I am not good at doing jewelry and the sparkly gem effect at all. So I tried it here. You can see. Tried to put those white things on there to make it look sparkly. I don't think it worked. So then, if I go even closer, I just put little white dots of gel pen. Can you see on there? And then over top, the gold gel pen that I colored, that I used to color sort of the outline of the jewel. I actually used a white gel pen on there as well, just to, they're like cartoony accents. You can see I did the same thing, and I actually did that on top of the glaze pen, because if I tilt, you can see the shine there, the glaze pen. And then the white gel pen, the Languo 1mm, just goes on top of it. But you do have to be careful, because you can see, obviously, I smudge there. I didn't wait for it to, it takes a long time. The white gel pen will take longer to dry on top of the glaze pen than it will on just paper. But, so yeah, I'm not good at gems. So really, was there any point in me showing you how to do that? No, because it wasn't done well. Out here. Here, I actually, and this is something I'll maybe do on a, no, I'll do it now. Why not? I made myself some paint markers. It didn't exactly work. And I made them, you can get these FW Daler-Rowney mixed media empty paint markers. And I showed these in a haul once before. And I've made a couple others as well, but I thought I would try it with. This is something you may see in a haul of mine for February 2026. This is Maya. Maya's, I won't say her fault, but I did see these on Maya's channel. So this is a Kuretake gold mica and silver mica inks. So these are, they're beautiful. They're beautiful inks. And Maya uses them quite often with like a paintbrush. Me being me, here's the little experiment. So this is like a, you're getting it all in this video, aren't you? You're getting some techniques, you're getting experiments, you're getting to see a halfway completed page. I will actually show you some Pitt Pen coloring techniques here in a bit. I thought I'm going to try and put those inks in these empty paint markers and see if that works. So these are paint markers in that they have that like plastic, hard plastic nib, kind of pointed. On the packaging for these, it specifically says, don't put metallic inks in these empty paint markers, because it'll clog the nibs. But of course, Connie being Connie, I'm like, wow, let's just try it. Let's just see how that goes. So, because I've done this actually with, where's the other one? I did it with the Shimmering Gold acrylic ink from Daler-Rowney. So that is, Daler-Rowney is, this isn't the Shimmering Gold, but it's these inks, right? So you can get the pearlescent ones. And so I took the Shimmering Gold, which, actually maybe I do have it here. Sorry, I shouldn't be looking for stuff when I'm supposed to be recording. Well, that's Shimmering Green. Shimmering Gold is somewhere. So I took the Shimmering Gold and I put it in here. And this actually works. It doesn't clog up. So then I guess I got really brave and thought, let's try the silver and the gold Kuretake inks. Yeah, they got clogged up. The gold more so than the silver. So I managed to do, so the little pearls are the silver, and it's more of a white than it's a silver. If I tilt that, so that didn't clog too badly, but the gold clogged up pretty... I mean, it was fine. You know, I activated it and used it to do sort of the string part here, and then this, and then this down at the bottom. The gold that's over here is different. That's just a gold gel pen. But after I did these parts, and then I put the pen away for a little bit, and then I took it out to use it again, then it was clogged. So I might have to just rinse that out, and I don't know what I'll do with that pen. But so there's a little experimentation that did not work. The inks are beautiful, but yeah, not so good in that pen. So after I had done, you know, those things, and then I was looking at the coloring, right? So again, me being me, leaves need to be green. So I did the leaves with a combination of the Pitt Pens and Staedtler pens. It was, I think, and I can do a separate video on, no, it wasn't, it was this one, on color combinations. But again, the best way for you to you know, really get a feel for these pens, try your own color combinations. And that's what I'm eventually getting to here. So for the leaves, I did the Staedtler Olive Dark, so that's the darkest part. And then I used this Pitt Pen May Green, and then the Pitt Pen Light Green as the lightest one to blend out to the edges. I did not spray this page with workable fixative. This is the English version of Spirit Animals. The Pitt Pens blend okay on this page, but there is a little bit of pilling. I can feel it. And it's not going to give you that smooth blend that you're going to get with colored pencils. These are a scarier, in a sense, medium to work with, and I think maybe that's why a lot of people avoid it. With colored pencils, you can erase, right? So if you're doing something and you're like, oh, it's a slower medium, I guess, maybe two. With these, you have to be fast, and you'll see when I'm coloring, because I'm going to show you coloring on some of these roses here. And so there's not a lot of time to sort of think. You just kind of have to just do. And so that can be scary, and that's why I say the only way you're going to get better coloring with these is to color with them. Not, I mean, I could do tens and hundreds and thousands of hours of color alongs, but unless you practice with them, you're not going to get better. That's just, I just think that's how it's going to go. So that's the greenery, was these. And then the centers here of these flowers, and then the centers of the little daisy-like flowers, I think was just 2 pens. It was this one and this one, if I remember. So the darker bit is green gold, 268 in the Pitt Pen, and then dark cadmium yellow, 108. These ones to go out to the, so that was the centers of the little flowers. And then I thought I wanted maybe a third color to go out, just because I felt I needed something lighter. My gold ink on my knuckle now. And so I used Ivory, 103 Pitt Pen. So this is, once I had done the silhouettes and then I made it look like old paper, I thought this needs to have more of a vintage color palette, which is okay, because that's what I love, right? Muted, vintage, old. And so using, you know, yellows like this, that's too bright. So this is a good combination, I think, for muted, vintage looking yellows. All right. I colored all of these little white flowers with a white gel pen. And looking at it, and again, this is a partly done page, they're too white, right? They're not fitting in with that vintage kind of vibe. So what I started to do down in this corner, I can show you this. Trust me, I really will color here in a sec. I took after they were dry, the warm gray 1 Pitt Pen. What was it's going to focus. There we go. And I can even show you, where are my glasses? Show you what I did. So you can see here, they're not on camera. And you know what? I'm going to move this other book. I don't know why I had that underneath. They're just too white, right? These have a little bit more something. So I just took this warm gray one, and all I did was this. So I started so it's sort of like shading from the base of the petal. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I might be well, it's kind of going blurry too, isn't it? Just sort of kind of flicking just there. You see what I did? It's very hard to see, but it's almost like a little bit of shading-ish. But this warm gray one is a fantastic color for making things look old, quite frankly. And also for like making things look vintage, blending. Then I took a warm gray 3, 272, which is the next warm gray in Pitt Pens. There is no, so that was 270, warm gray 1. There is no 271 in the Pitt Pens. There is in the Polychromos and Albrecht Dürer, but not in the Pitt Pens. And the warm gray 3, I just am going to do, before I colored these over with white gel pens, there were little black individual lines, like this. You see? I'll move that hand. On each petal. So instead of putting black lines in, I'm going to take this warm gray 3, and just put very light little lines like they were. Because I don't want stark black and I don't want stark white. To me, that's not working with the more vintage color palette. The flowers, and you can see it here on this flower, and you'll see it on the rose when I go to work. I did not worry about putting masking fluid or anything else down. So basically they got distress ink all over them. The leaves did too. But because it was lighter and I wanted the whole page to look, it was a lighter color, I wanted the whole page to look kind of vintage, I wasn't too worried about it. So I'm actually going to color over top of that distress ink, which in a way actually gives kind of a benefit. So I was saying I did not spray this page with workable fixative. Quite often I will if I'm going to be coloring with Pitt Pens or Staedtler pens, if the paper isn't going to play nicely with them. They are water-based, and I blend directly on the page, and sometimes the paper gets angry, and it starts to pill a little bit. So spraying with workable fixative, Krylon workable fixative, or pre-treating a page with some kind of sizing medium, or like the satin glazing liquid, all of those things puts a coating on the page and then allows me to blend on the page better with the pens. This paper isn't bad, so I chose not to spray. The distress ink, though, must have some glycerin in it, because on the areas where I've actually gotten, distress ink on a part where I'm going to color, these blend much better. So there's that. So thinking about colors for the flowers, and here's where you're going to see me doing a little bit of coloring. Again, just a little, it's not exactly a color long. I don't even know if it's a tutorial. This is a combination video. It's a color and chat. It's an experimentation video. It's a little bit of a tutorial. It's a little bit of me explaining what I've done. I don't know even what to call it. But I wanted the colors to be muted, vintage. And if you look at, these are my swatch cards for the Staedtler pens and the Pitt Pens. There's a lot of bright colors, but particularly sort of reds and pinks. That's because I wanted Valentine's Day, I wanted the roses here to be red or pink. There's not a lot of muted reds and pinks, are there? Like grayed out kind of reds and pinks. I mean, this maybe, that's more purpley. These pinks here, I mean, that is, but it's almost more peachy. And then we get into, those are some pretty bright pinks. And even when we get back here, I mean, I guess I could have gone here, but again, those are more almost peachy flesh tones. I wanted pink, but old vintage muted pink. And there just isn't a color like that. Even in the 120 colors that I have when I combine my 60 Pitt Pens and 60 Staedtler pens, there isn't a color. So I'm looking at these colors. That was the closest that I wanted, but I still wanted it more muted. And this is not something that I've done actually before. And again, I don't know how well this is working. It's actually more muted on camera than it is to me in real life. Turn this light back on. No, that makes it worse. What I did was I took that number 21 light rosé Staedtler Pigment Pen, see, and I took the warm gray 1 Pitt Pen and the warm gray 3 Pitt Pen, the same ones I was just using on those little white flowers, and I'm going to use these to give, the darker one is going to be my shadow areas. I'm going to use warm gray 1 to blend out the pink, as opposed to a lighter pink to blend out the pink. Or even just, because I do have some of that, Staedtler makes a blending liquid for their pigment pens, which it also works with Pitt Pens. And I put it in this empty aqua drop liner. So it's called the Staedtler multi-ink blending fluid. So it's basically a clear blender for Staedtler pens or pigment pens. And it comes in a bottle. You can put it on with a paintbrush. You could also put it in a water brush. But these empty aqua drop liners by Schminke have that kind of a nib, which is very similar to a Pitt Pen nib. That's why I chose to put it in one of these. You can just buy these empty. And you can buy replacement nibs for these. But again, I didn't want to blend out. It's not that I wanted this pink lighter, right? It's a fairly light pink to begin with, but I didn't want, again, I was, testing this on a piece of paper. If I take this pink, take this blender, it's not going to work great on this paper, it's just computer paper, printer paper. I can blend it out, but to me that was still too pink. So I thought, well, what if instead of using, the clear blender, actually, if I do it there, where I put the, that'll be better at blending because I have the, well, maybe not. I had the distress ink down. What if instead I use the warm gray 1 to blend it out? What would that look like? I was like, that's what I want. Again, it's pinkier to me than it is to you. To you it looks very, and I'm not sure how to fix that lighting, sorry. To you it looks maybe more gray, but there's still pink coming through there for me. So that's what I did. So when I'm going to color with these pens, I take the caps off. I could put them on the end, but I find they kind of flop around and then fall off and then get in my way. So I just take them off, put them to the side. I'm right-handed, so I hold them in my left hand. I quite often put, let's see, what I'm going to use. I quite often put them, I'm trying to think here, in this order. So that's what I'm going to use first. There's my shadow. Then I'm going to put pink down. Then I'm going to use the warm gray 1 to blend everything together. So I take this, I do what I'm doing, and then I tend to put it back in my hand on the other side, right? So I just basically, and then I take this, and I'm going to do, and then I put it over there. And then I take, so can you see how they're kind of rotating through my hand? That means that I can work with them quickly and not always having to look for what color I'm going to be using, because you do have to work quickly with these when you're coloring. And I'm going to show you. So I don't want to zoom in much more because I think it'll just kind of keep going blurry. Just put your stuff out of the way here. We'll see. We'll see what we can get. I also turn my book because when I'm coloring with these, I do a lot of the little flicking motion. And to me, it gives a much better flick if I'm flicking away from myself as opposed to towards myself, if that makes sense. So if I look at this rose petal, Hannah's already given an indication of where the bottom is, where it's kind of going down into the rose. And it's where she's put these little lines, right? So down there is going to be dark, and it's going to be dark, you know, I'm assuming this little bit is hanging over that bit. It's going to be dark where it goes down into the rose there. So I've got my other pens at the ready. I also have a little piece of card here that I like to lay my hand on, just so my hand doesn't, I don't know, in case I have something in my hand. And I also have that scrap paper. And I'll try and keep this on camera so you can see what I'm doing. Again, I'm trying to teach a technique here, not so much, you know, do exactly as I do. So actually, if I have this paper right here, I wouldn't need I could just rest my hand on the scrap paper, couldn't I? So, putting in my shadow. So this is the Warm Gray 3. Kind of flicking a little bit there. And I'm assuming that little bit right there is kind of folded over towards me. So I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit of a shadow under there. Down my hand, my pink. I'm going to go back over everywhere I've done the pink, plus kind of out a little bit. I'm assuming, can you see where I've left it uncolored right there? That's the lightest part. Then I take this and I give a quick little scribble. Just in case it's picked up any of the gray. Sorry, I know the camera keeps going out of focus. And then I take that Warm Gray 1 and make these kind of scumbling motions very lightly. I'm barely touching the page, all over everything. Is this pilling up the paper a bit? Yeah, it is. I can feel it. But that's okay. Then I scribble this off. There was a little bit of pink on there. Just, you know, put it back in my hand. Now they're in that first, second, third order again. That doesn't look great. It's going to look better as it dries, but you can see up close, the blends that I get are not perfect. They're very kind of spotty. They're not smooth. I'm okay with that. And I think to color with these pens, you have to be okay with that too, right? The only way you're going to get really nice smooth blends with any kind of water-based pen is on watercolor paper. And that's not what this is. Had I sprayed this first, would I have gotten a little bit better blends? Yeah, probably. But I didn't. So I'm just going with what, you know, what's happening here. So we're going to do this one, this little petal here now. So we've got a bit of a shadow there. I'm assuming there's a shadow there because that one there is kind of falling over top. Maybe a little shadow down in there. And the shadows, I don't know that I'm the best person to teach how to figure out where shadows are. I just try and think if something's overlapping something else, that's where shadow's going to be. That's pretty much how I do shadows. You saw me scribbling off, and then now I've moved on to my Warm Gray. And I just kind of scumbling motion over everything. I just want to take the pink down. Right? And I will say on camera, this rose looks gray. It looks pinker than that to me. It doesn't quite look as gray as it does on camera. But, I mean, maybe you're not a fan of this color. You know, if you want it more pink, you could put more pink more pink ink down before you do the scumbling. So now these foldy over bits. This is always tough for me. Where is the shadow? I mean, this folded over bit kind of goes down in there, but would there be a shadow there? Let's see, there's a little bit of darkness down here. I'm totally making this up. A little bit here. I have no idea. Sure, why not? Pink. not quite out to the edge, because, I don't know, just cause. And then light gray. Scumble, 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 scumble. Scumbling is just that circular. There. Do it again. These little bits are harder because they're small, so maybe a little shadow there, just maybe at the corners. Who knows? This I might just cover the whole thing in pink because there's very little area, room to work. And then the whole thing in warm gray just to take some of that pink down. If I feel like the paper is really starting to pill, I can even, instead of scumbling, I'm just tapping this warm gray on there if I wanted a little bit more of that warm gray color. Again, such a tiny area here. Sorry, I know the camera keeps freaking out. I wanted to have it zoomed so you could see what I was doing. Here. I'm also not a colorist that puts a whole lot of contrast in, and I know I probably should. Maybe it's something I need to work on. So my darks, you know, my shadows are not super shadowed. Oh, this one's tough. Okay, so what is this petal doing? I'm going to say there's a shadow here. Maybe along this inner edge. I don't really know. Sure, like that. That's why I don't like tutorials for me to do, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm winging it most of the time. Winging it. I haven't scribbled that pink off for a long time, have I? Sometimes I forget. Particularly if I'm doing kind of small spaces like this. I don't necessarily scribble it off every time, because I figure it probably doesn't pick up like a ton of other color in a very small space like that. So let's try a bigger area. Let's go over here. So again, where Hannah has put these lines, I'm assuming that's, oops, sorry. I'm assuming that's, you know, the petal is going down in, so that's where I'm going to put shadow. This bit right here, I'm assuming is kind of, you know, folded over, so there's going to be a shadow under there. So that's where I'm going to put shadows. And I'm barely touching the paper when I'm using these. That's another thing. You can't really, the hardest pressure, and sometimes I'll go back over, particularly, you know, right down in that little crook there. I figure that's where the deepest shadow is, so I'll just put a little bit more ink down in there. Maybe right along the bottom there. The most pressure that I'm putting down is when I take that lightest color. In this case, it's the warm gray one. And sort of, you know, scumbling it over top of everything. Now, again, that's pretty pink. Maybe even put a little bit of pink up where I had the shadow there. I'm trying to leave that area there that, I mean, you know, could have been a highlight of white, but in this case, I'm going to make it a highlight of warm gray. And this kind of, you know, scumble, like I say, over top of it all. Paper's starting, it's pilling a little bit because there's little bits on my every so often I give the markers a little scribble off, just in case there's any, even the darkest one, which technically isn't really being blended with anything because it's not coming in contact with the other colors of ink, right? Because that's going down first. Just in case there's any little paper bits. But, I mean, does it look great? No. But it actually, I think, I mean, this one appears dry, right? I did this yesterday. Looks better dry. This one, mostly dry. You can see we just did a few small areas there, but maybe that petal right there looks a little gray. And if I think that's the case, I can always go, you know, this is now dry. If I think, well, that's just too gray. Roses aren't that gray, Connie. Take a little bit of pink, kind of put it in that area. Take that warm gray one again. Kind of blend it in. once there, did I pink it up or did I just make it more warm gray? Maybe it needs a bit more pink. Once this is dry, it gives its own, now I'm just dotting the pink on there. It actually kind of creates a coating of its own for the paper. So then it becomes very barely touching the paper with this warm gray. There. Now it's a little spotty too, but that's okay. Flowers and everything in real life, leaves, they have texture. You know, they have spots, they have imperfections, they have that stuff. This will sort of change color as it dries. So will this. But again, you know, to color with these on anything other than watercolor paper, you kind of really have to just embrace that watercolory kind of imperfect look. All right. So that's my technique. I mean, I can do one more petal, but again, you know, watching me do petal after petal after petal, it's kind of the same. Now you have to go try. Doesn't have to be on this book, on this page. Doesn't have to be a rose. It can be whatever you want it to be. But the coloring technique, and also the idea of using a bright color, but using either maybe the warm grays or, I mean, pink is a warm color, right? Pink, red, orange, yellow, those are warm colors. If I was doing a blue flower, maybe I would use the cool grays to give it a muted vintage look. Or a purple color. Purple kind of, I think purple can be warm or cool. And again, I'm not an artist. I could be wrong on that. But try, you know, get a scrap piece of paper, grab yourself some bright colors, and then try blending them out with warm gray and try blending them out with cool gray. See which look you like better. So this petal here, have a shadow there because it goes behind that other petal. Probably a little shadow under there. I'm actually not working as fast as I normally would because I'm talking to you at the same time. So maybe the blends aren't as good as they could be. I'll try leaving a smaller highlight space so we don't get quite so much gray. These warm gray colors are almost more of a taupe, like a tanny gray. There, maybe that's a little bit better. You know, maybe this is a bit too gray. But yeah, that's how I'm going to do this. These little bluey white flowers here, I basically did the same thing, except I used, for the blue, this Hazy Blue by Staedtler. There we go. This is one of the newer, well, last year was a new color. Last year, the year before, my gosh, I can't even remember. And I used the warm gray to blend that out, but I think I would have been better with cool gray because blue is definitely a cool color. So that was a mistake on my part. And then the edges of the flowers, they just look weird with this warm gray. I think it suits pink. Like I say, it suits warm colors better. See? These are the things that I should know, or I would know if I was an artist, but I am not. So I have to learn by trial and error. I make mistakes. So I didn't like the way the edges of, I'm just putting, because I'm talking now, so I'm putting the caps back on these. They don't do well if they stay uncapped for long. So I didn't like the edges here. So I took the white Pitt pen, which is fantastic. If you have no other Pitt pens, get a white. And you can get these open stock. And it's kind of opaque, can you see? But kind of not. I mean, it's not opaque like a gel pen is going to be opaque. But it's certainly somewhat opaque. And I just flicked up from the bottom like this, right over top of the kind of warm gray that I had pulled out to the edges, just to give the bottom of the flowers, I don't know, just a little bit brighter look. And you know, again, trying things. Can you see on this petal right here? It looks slightly different at the very edge. See right along there? I took the white Pitt pen and put a little white mark right along the edge, trying to give it a bit of a brighter highlight. It didn't work. What it did was it turned the pink that I had put down, that I had muted down with the warm grays, it brought that pink back out and made it pink. So then I thought, well, I don't really like that. So I colored back over it with warm gray 1 once it was dry. But I could still see it a little bit. Once I zoom out, I mean, you probably didn't see it until I pointed it out. But yeah, that's how I color. I try things, you know, obviously I didn't know how it was going to look. So I didn't do it on every petal. I just did it on one little small area. Looked at it for a while and thought, no, I don't like that. So I colored back over it with warm gray 1. You know, I had actually started coloring these flowers with a different color gel pen. It was like a really light pink. And I thought, no, I don't like that. So I waited till that dried. And then I went back over them with a white gel pen. Till that dried. And then thought, that's too... These look too white and too cartoony to go along with these vintagey looking roses that I'm trying to create and the whole, you know, old paper silhouette. Like that to me looked too... So I thought, well, how can I fix that? So I thought, well, let's try the warm grays since I'm using them anyway. And let's try and tone these little flowers down a bit. Is it, I mean, should I maybe have taken my time and used the white Pitt pen and actually done, you know, shading and on all these little, maybe I just shouldn't have colored them with a gel pen. But like I say, I had started coloring a few of these with like a light pink gel pen and it wasn't working. So then I'm like, well, I have to cover this gel pen. You kind of have to cover gel pen with gel pen or acrylic paint or something. So yeah. And then, like I say, glaze pen, I mean, that's why it looks shiny. I colored it with Pitt pen first. That's about 2 or 3 coats of glaze pen. So you do one, let it dry, do another, let it dry. That's why it almost looks 3-dimensional. I can actually feel it is a tiny bit 3-dimensional. Will that impact the other page, you know, the back side if I was to color it? Yeah. But remember, we looked at the back side of this. I'm not going to color that. Odds are. So I don't really care. And then once the glaze pen was dry, I did put a little white, just cartoony highlights, but it just gives it, I don't know. The glaze pen itself, I mean, you can see where the highlights were going to fall because they actually do. So did I put my highlights in the right spot? Probably not, but that's okay. I'm not an artist. And if I wanted to train to be an artist, then, I mean, watching color alongs is going to give me ideas, sure. But I mean, training to be an artist, my goodness, I mean, that takes years and years and years and years. And even then, I don't think it's so much, it's not like you watch your teacher for hours on end, at least, and please correct me if I'm wrong. If any of you have gone to art school, maybe I'm totally wrong on this, but you wouldn't watch your art teacher for hours on end painting an entire picture from beginning to end. Unless maybe that's how... I don't think so, though. To me, it doesn't sound right. Your art teacher is going to teach you techniques. And then you take those techniques and you go and apply them on your own. And you make mistakes and you screw up and you learn from those mistakes. So, yeah, this video turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like 10, 15 minutes. Well, you know me. I yammer. But that's what I want to maybe do more of. So, I don't know. They're not so much color alongs. I don't even know what to call tutorial. Experimentation. I don't know. I do not know what to call this video. I'll have to try and figure it out. But, you know, maybe it gave you some ideas you can take. I mean, you can certainly, if you have this book and you want to do this page like this, go right ahead. I can't visualize. And I think I've talked about that before. For whatever reason, my brain doesn't work that way. So when I look at a blank page, I can't see it. I can't see the finished page in my head. So maybe that's another reason why color alongs are hard for me, because I don't have a plan. Color alongs kind of usually mean you have to have a plan. I don't have a plan. My only plan when I started this was, I don't like faces. Hey, I watched Cranford. maybe I could turn it into a silhouette. So that was the very first thing I did. I colored this lady. I colored her skin black. That was step one. But it wasn't like I had that was my only plan. Then my plan slightly evolved, and I thought, well, what if I use black gel pen to make her hair look slightly different from her skin? Would that look cool? So then that was step two. But again, it wasn't really a plan. It was just, one thing follows on another. Did that. Decided I didn't like that because the black was too different from the skin. So then I went, after the gel pen dried, I went over all the gel pen with that same Zig Art and Graphic marker. Then I looked at the page for a while, and I thought, well, it looks weird that she is in silhouette, but what color would I color the birds, and would that look weird? And then I thought, well, no, I'm going to color the birds black. So then I did that. So that's how my pages develop. I don't have... I have the old Sarah Renee Clark color cubes, and I have the that Practical Color Combinations book. I don't use them. I think you kind of sort of have to have a brain that can see what the finished image is going to look like in a way to use. I don't know. Do you guys find that? Because I can look at a page and I can have a color. In fact, I even pulled out a bunch of color cards here that I was going to use for like winter pictures, and I never used them because I can't look at this and look at a blank page and think, okay, where would these go to make this look good? I don't know. My brain can't do it. And it was only after I did all the black that I thought, well, then maybe I should use something, no idea what, to make the paper look old. Because, it's like silhouettes, and that's kind of old-timey. So then I had to think, should I use like soft pastels, like pan pastels? Should I use gel crayons? What am I going to use? Let's try some. I could use gel crayons, but gel crayon colors, lots of them tend to be brighter. So I'm like, well, I know I have all the mini inks, the distress ink cubes, and I know there's some like vintagey distressed colors in there. Let's use those. So then I did the background, and then I had to sit and think for a while more. Because at that point, I hadn't colored anything else. I was like, okay, so I'm going to color the... I knew that was the only plan. After this was in silhouette, I thought, well, okay, these strings that all these jewels, are on are going to be gold. That was as far as my plan went. And then it was kind of like, well, it's February 2026. It's Valentine's Day coming up. Maybe the roses should be pink or red. And then that started me down the whole, the pinks and reds that I have, they're too bright. How am I going to make them look vintage? What am I going to do? What if I use that colorless blender and will that make them look? No, I didn't like that. Well, then what if I use a gray to blend them out? Will that make them look vintage? Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So then, we'll just go with that. I still don't know what color these are going to be. I have no idea. No idea. The roses will be this pink-gray combination. I did these kind of blue-gray. These are white, and then I'm going to kind of, gray them all out. I have no idea what color those are going to be. The jewel was pink and blue, because after I decided the roses were going to be pink and these little flowers were going to be blue, then this little heart was pink. Now, this was actually a slightly different pink. Instead of this pink, it was a Pitt Pen pink. I think it was 129, which is Pink Matter Lake. And then I still blended it out and shadowed with the two warm grays. So that pink shade is a little different than that pink shade. It's more pink. This is more coral. Had I wished I did... Maybe. Maybe I should do these flowers pink, but this pink. Is that too much pink? I mean, we have a little bit of blue. Got blue on the jewel here. These will be pink. Pink. And then these will be darker pink. Is it too much pink? I don't know. Because I can't see it. I can't. Oftentimes I will just do something and hope it works. And I guess I've been doing this long enough that oftentimes now it does work. There's lots of times it doesn't. Yeah, so we've got some blue on the jewel, a little tiny bit of pink on the jewel. This is a different pink than that. It's pinkier. That's more peachier. I still would use the gray to blend it out, this pink. Because otherwise this is the only spot. I can't remember what pink I used there. Huh. All right, I have to think about it. I did think about doing blue again down here. One pink, one blue? No, I don't like that. That's another thing that I've learned. If you want a page to look kind of muted and vintage and, you know, don't use too many colors. Because the more colors you start adding, the harder it is, and I think I've said this before, the harder it is to control, in a sense, and not make it just look chaotic. But that's just me. That's the type of coloring I like to do. There are others who love bright pops of color just, you know, going everywhere. And that's fantastic. That I absolutely, that's the beautiful part about art, isn't it? You get to be creative in your own way. So, yeah, I just want to teach you little bits and pieces and odds and ends and, you know, different techniques and different ideas. Try them out, see if you like them, apply them in different ways. But to me, that feels better to me than doing full-length color-alongs on, you know, a single page or a double page spread or whatever. But saying, you know, here are the colors I'm going to use this exact color here, use this exact color there. Probably that feels less comfortable to me because I can't visualize it. You know, and then I would record, you know, a 4-hour or 5-hour color-along and get to the end and color these flowers this pink that I had decided, and then look at it and go, oh, that looks terrible. Well, now I have 4 to 5 hours of footage that's garbage, right? If I could visualize it ahead of time, I would feel more confident, I guess, that it wouldn't be garbage in the end. But nonetheless, you will probably see this completed page, hopefully, in my completed pages at the end of February 2026. And you can see, it'll be a mystery until then. What color does Connie colorless flowers? You never know. All right, folks, I think I've yammered on long enough. I haven't said this in a while, but I guess I will. If you like what you're seeing on my videos, consider liking the video, subscribing. There's some kind of hype feature that I'm not entirely sure how that works, but if it, you know, helps, go for it. Leave a comment. And you can disagree with me completely. You can say, Connie, you know, I respectfully disagree. I think that those full-length color-alongs that I see are incredibly useful to me, and I've learned so much from them. That's totally... I love that kind of comment. I do. But if you tell me, you know, really angrily that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about, that's less helpful. So constructive criticism and disagreeing, and just be ready and prepared that I may not, you know, you may tell me in the comments that you disagree with me. I probably won't come back and say you're right. I may. But just be okay with the fact that I might come back and say, that's a really fascinating insight. I'm glad you shared it. But I still think I'm going to stick with, you know, these kinds of choppy videos that aren't full-length color-alongs. So, there it is. I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone is well. And I hope everyone is enjoying their coloring. Till next time, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.